Hello, Rowena. Thank you so much for doing this for me. Um, what I would love you to talk to me about today is when your parents and you first became associated with Woodford. Could you just give me a little bit of background, please?
My parents bought the house in Forest Approach in the early 1930s, before I was born, and also before the Central Line was extended to Epping. They bought it in anticipation of the Central Line being extended before it was. For some reason, it didn't happen in the 1930s, and then, of course, the war came. So they didn't actually live in it.
So you weren't here for the war. Where did you go for the war?
When the war broke out, we lived in Finchley in North London, but because of the Blitz, we went and stayed with a friend of my mother's in Basingstoke, and I don't know how long for. The friend had a boy of my age called Albert, and he was a very naughty boy. We then went to Cleethorpes, which was where my parents came from. We stayed for some time with her brother, and then she and her sister rented a bungalow where we lived with my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, and a young cousin who was born in 1940, whose father had been torpedoed. He never knew his father.
Oh, that's awful.
I first went to school in Cleethorpes.
So how did you end up back in Woodford?
My parents came back, or my father had never come up with us. My mother came back when I was 6. This was one of the most traumatic times of my life because I went to another school, I had a funny name and the wrong set of vowels, and people were not kind. It was very, very unpleasant.
When you came back here?
When I came back to Finchley.
To Finchley?
Yes.
But when you moved to Woodford, what was that like?
It was much nicer that, you see, I had 3 primary schools. I did love the grammar school I went to, and I went to with a very close friend whom I'd met at the primary school, so something good came of that. And I just did not want to change at all. But in those days, people didn't worry so much about what the children wanted. My parents had decided the time had come to move into Woodford. The Central Line by that time was extended, so that criterion was met, and we came in 1951. And I went to Woodford County High.
And you liked Woodford County High?
And I liked Woodford County High very, very much indeed.
You made good friends?
I did indeed, whom I still have.
But it was a difficult period for all that because it was your O-level year.
It was my O-level year, yes.
And it did affect your O-levels?
Oh yes, particularly on the science side.
You liked science?
I liked the science. No, I liked physics and biology. I didn't like chemistry, but that was my arrogance. I didn't like doing fiddly experiments again and again and again. But the science syllabus was different, and sciences are structured in a way that the art subjects aren't. So I couldn't fit into the science. I, in fact, had to take science in my 6th form year in order to have a science when I got the 2 years in, if you see what I mean. And the maths was disastrous. I mean, I would have to do some special course and exam to qualify as a teacher now, because I suddenly found myself in what I later realised was an alternative maths syllabus. It wasn't only different. It was an alternate. It was the alternative A level that they did at Woodford
at the time.
At the time.
But for all that, it was fun being here.
Oh yes, for all that. Yes.
And what was your social life like?
Well, I'm not a great extrovert. I'm not one who wants to be out every night or anything like that. So probably I wasn't as demanding as some people would have been.
But you did go to the hall.
I went to the hall. We used to meet in what is now the Churchill Room on Sunday afternoons. You may have heard of Arthur Cuff.
Yes, I have.
Well,
I've heard that he was a very beautiful person.
He was indeed. And he had Sunday afternoon meetings there and discussions. And we used to have fun and games on one evening a week. I think it was Tuesday, I can't remember which. And then there were some dances. And there were some plays. I can remember playing Pilot's Wife in one of the plays.
I've always liked Pilot's Wife.
Yes.
I think she's a fabulous character.
Lady Claudia Procula.
Quite a role. So that was a really good part of being back in Woodford.
It was, yes.
Did you make
and there
good
was a
friends
tennis
there?
court too, where there is now Lindell House, where the flats are.
And did you used to use that?
And we used to play tennis there.
Oh, okay. So that was your formative teenage years, really. And then you sort of you stayed here for 6 years, if I remember rightly, or 7 years, until you were about 22. And then you left.
Yes, well, that would be the case. But of course, I was at university.
For part of that time.
For part of that time. So I was away at term time.
So, you had to leave, and then eventually you went to travelling, I think, and you ended up going to South Africa.
Yes.
Very exciting. Were you there for a period of time?
2 years.
2 years. Did you teach there?
Yes.
Okay. What was it like teaching in South Africa?
Well, in South Africa, they had a national curriculum in a way that doesn't operate or didn't operate in England at the time. I taught Latin.
Oh my gosh!
And completely differently from when I came to Finchley with my northern vowels. See, by then I had some lessons at a school called Ada Foster in Golders Green. I went to their Saturday morning acting classes, and I learned to speak as I speak now, which was very, very good in South Africa because the English schools liked an English accent.
Oh, okay. So you were very popular there.
So I was very popular there.
You were very popular.
Yes.
But eventually you did come back, but you didn't move back to Woodford.
Oh, yes. I mean, when I came back, I came to the family home.
Oh, you did come back to the family home. And so there'd been a little bit of a break. Had there been any changes during that period?
Oh, yes. There were more cars on the road.
Gosh, even in those 2 years?
Yes, gradually. And I would say that people, I don't know about 2 years, but in the 60s, a lot of people acquired cars. There were still cows that wandered round on the green and sometimes down the streets. I think that was probably the...
Was there still a sense of community here?
Yes, oh yes.
A big sense of community?
Yes, there was quite a lot of local feeling, very much so.
Okay.
And there was a lot of feeling, this I do remember, because while I was away, Wanstead and Woodford had become part of the London Borough of Redbridge.
Ah.
And that had been resisted when the Greater London Act was first proposed. I went to a meeting in what are now the flats, though the Wanstead and Woodford had no town hall. They used to meet in what was the old rectory. And I can remember going to a meeting there with the idea that the London Borough of Redbridge was to be resisted. We were to keep our local autonomy, you see. Well, I knew that wouldn't happen.
But you still went along?
Well, I went along because it was interesting, to see. But I knew that it was most unlikely that any of the London boroughs would resist this act. And I thought it was necessary that the Greater London Council came and replaced the old LCC. Yes.
But actually it was quite interesting from the point of view of the level of feeling
indeed.
within Woodford.
It was indeed.
That it had sort of, produced. Okay, so then you have quite a break because then you don't really... You come and see your parents regularly. So obviously you see changes generally in Woodford, but you didn't move back for almost 43 years.
Yes. Well, with those 4 years.
Except for the 4 years in between.
When I got I was teaching in Dagenham. I mean, they wanted people to go there. They were practically meeting boats to get Australians off the boats to go to some schools.
What, in Dagenham
Well,
particularly?
in London.
In London?
generally,
Oh,
yes.
Gosh, it was that bad.
And this was a secondary model school in Dagenham. That was another eye-opener. And in fact, it was while I was there that the ladies in the upholstery department went on strike. Made in Dagenham.
Yes.
And I don't think I taught any of the children of the mothers of the ladies on strike, but certainly there were a lot of people whose fathers were working at Ford's. The majority, I would say, had fathers working at Ford's, and they felt very strongly one way or the other about this strike. And then, unlike the film, Mrs. Castle went down to Dagenham. In the film, she invites the ladies to Whitehall, but Mrs. Castle went to Dagenham, and the kids would say, "Who's Mrs. Castle? What's she come down here for?"
Love it. Absolutely love it. Gosh, that's really part of history.
Definitely. It is part of history.
Really part of history.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Because it did a great deal towards
women's rights.
Women's rights. Yes, indeed.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, so even that 4 years, something exciting has happened. You go away, and obviously, as I said, do come and see your parents regularly. But then, unfortunately, your dad died, and then your mum became very ill.
Yes, my father died in 1976, which was the end of the hot summer. Now, he'd never been able to take the heat, so I think we didn't realise, and he didn't realise how ill he was getting. My mother didn't die for another 17 years. And I would say, in many ways, those were the 17 years I got on with her best, which is a sad thing, but there are tensions in a marriage and so on. So, you say sadly she died. She didn't die for another 17 years. And until the last few years when her mind started to go, I would say with the time my best relationship with my mother.
That's really lovely. You also told me that unfortunately she had a bit of an incident in the bathroom, but the big thing you mentioned was your neighbours in Woodford at the time, your mum's neighbours, and they were brilliant, weren't they?
Yes. They were when she fell. I mean, when I was coming back, I think they tended to leave things to me. And as she got frailer and forgetful and so on, they would say to me, they would tell her how wonderful she was. And then they would say to me, "You ought to stop your mother doing this, that and the other," and so on. And as soon as I tried, she'd say, "Well, I will tell you, other people think I manage very well." So this sort of went round and round in circles. But it was just getting to the point where I was so exhausted with working all the week and coming back at the weekend, and she was forgetting to pay bills. So I was sort of going round looking, spying on her almost. In a way, after she'd fallen, and she went into a home in Chingford, originally for 6 weeks, she had to go and fall the week that the first Iraqi war broke out.
Oh my gosh.
And they were trying to keep all the hospital wards clear, because they were frightened people were going to come back with skin diseases and so on and so forth. So I really had to fight quite hard for her to be kept in hospital while I looked round for somewhere for her to be, which fortunately I did find quite quickly.
And you mentioned that, Bob Birchnell, even though your mum wasn't a member of the church, he visited her regularly,
I don't know how regularly he went. I mean, she was in the home for 3 years, and certainly he went from time to time, which was beyond the call of duty.
Yes, it's lovely that somebody would,
Yes.
do that. It's a real act of Christianity.
And interestingly enough, and I always say this when people say, oh, I went to see so-and-so, but she didn't recognise me. If I went at the weekend, I always could tell if she'd had a visitor midweek, because even if she couldn't remember, she was brighter.
Oh.
So I do say to people when they say, well, there was no point in my going to see, they didn't recognise me, I say, yes, there was a point. Yeah. You probably did more good than you realise.
Oh, that's lovely. Now, so when you came back, because obviously with your mum going into a home and, eventually you made the decision that you'd move back to Woodford, did you notice big changes? Because obviously you hadn't lived here. You'd come, but it's different living somewhere. Did you notice changes?
Well, I think most of the physical changes had been done. I mean, they had sunk the South End Road because for most of my time in Woodford, there had been where Waitrose is now Gates Corner.
Right.
It had been a garage, and that road was the same. You could walk along and you didn't... If you went to Ilford, you didn't have to go down.
Right.
And so on. No, there were more one-way streets physically.
Was there different...
People, of course, went to supermarkets.
and what about the makeup of Woodford? Had that changed?
I don't know that it has changed that much, apart from, as I say, the sinking of the A406.
What about the people?
From
when you were a child to now?
I don't know. In many ways, in this neighbourhood, there were quite a lot of old ladies in houses. They have died and been replaced by young families. I think that's the big thing. But of course now house prices are such, people are tending to stick, aren't they? And the children come back.
What is happening? Sorry. So how did you get back involved with the church and back involved with the hall? I mean, I know that you don't necessarily use the hall a lot, but I know that you recently had a series of Lent discussions, which took place in the Churchill rooms. But you didn't just come back into Woodford and then just start at the church, did you? How did that happen?
No. Well, I went to church, and Geoffrey knew me.
Geoffrey Smith.
Yes. Of course, I had been there pretty often on Saturdays and so on. But as I say, after 6 months, which is a necessary period, I went to see Geoffrey and said, I am a reader, I would like to practice. Do you want to use me? He said yes. So I was relicensed in 1975 at the Cathedral in Chelmsford, and I have continued to practice as a reader
at the church.
And yes, as one of the team. I knew Alison because Alison was at Woodford County High School.
Oh, okay.
In fact, when we had one of the it must have been the 50th birthday, she led some prayers, and it was said how proud the headmistress would have been that one of her girls was one of the first women to be ordained in this country.
Oh my gosh!
So
how
if you
lovely.
don't know about Alison was one of the first women to be ordained.
And she went to Woodford County Girls.
And she went to Woodford County.
And she was one of your best friends.
No, she was a few years older.
She's a few years older than you.
I mean, I knew her more than she knew me, because you do know
the oldest.
Yes. She could have been 3 years, because she was still there. And as I say, I was in my O-level year. But, yes.
So, what do you think of the hall?
Well, I think it's very good and very necessary, because if they shut St James Hawkley, it's going to be the hall, isn't it? And it just does need a lot of work put into it. But it's a shame it's been left so long. It was a shame it wasn't done before the austerity came. Edmund Booth did have a campaign, but that was for the flesh.
That's right.
I got involved in that. So I suppose that was my biggest direct thing. But otherwise, sometimes I have been to the lunches. I don't go very often to the lunches. I know some people go regularly. I tend to forget they're on because I have a pattern and I've sort of got my lunch in the slow cooker or something like that. So I only go when there's a big thing.
One of the things you mentioned to me was that one of the reasons you felt, one of the things that did help you to make the decision to move back to Woodford was that you'd maintained your friendships here.
Yes.
From, when you were much younger. So even though it was difficult leaving West London where you lived, it was actually a positive move in many ways to come back because of the friends you kept through all those years.
Yes.
And you've still maintained those friendships.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that
it's Maureen and Richard Hoskins. As I say, Maureen was at Woodford County High School, and we're still very good friends, yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It's been fabulous. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.